So this upcoming week is going to be one of the most important weeks for the Nintendo Switch 2, and it really boils down to one specific thing: games. Obviously, games are very important, but this week there are 4 games coming out for the Nintendo Switch 2 that people are going to be looking at for a myriad of reasons. Not just to see if these games are good or not, but the more important question of what to expect from potential Nintendo Switch 2 games going forward, especially from third-party companies. So I want to talk about these 4 games, including 3 games that are third-party games and 1 game that is a first-party game that is an exclusive for the Nintendo Switch 2, and kind of highlight the importance of all of these titles and why this is going to be, really a huge week for the Nintendo Switch 2. So without any further ado, let's talk about the first batch of games on our list. Now, on this list, 3 of these games are third-party games, and they all come out on December 2nd. So, RIP my sleep schedule. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna play all of these, because I actually want to cover every single one of these games. It's obviously just going to be a bit challenging. So feel free to let me know in the comment section kind of these next 3 games, what hierarchy you want to see me cover them, and I'll take that into consideration. Now, when talking about these games, I will be talking about them from what I think is the least important to the most important. The first game is Red Dead Redemption for the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, if you own this game on the Nintendo Switch 1, this is a free upgrade. And this, of course, is the classic Red Dead Redemption 1 that came out on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. Now, yes, it's an old game, but I feel like Rockstar games, when they get updates onto modern platforms, tend to still feel and play very fresh, especially when you look at what a lot of other third-party companies are doing and how long the quality of their games tends to last. Now, the Switch 1 version of the game was pretty cool. You know, it ran well, it looked good on the system, but the Switch 2 version looks to be an even better version of that game. 60 frames per second, you have mouse controls in the game now, which I think will be very interesting to check out. All sorts of technological improvements in terms of graphics and frame rates and stuff like that. I think this will be very interesting, and very interesting to compare it to things like the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 version of the game. So why would this be lowest on my totem pole of games? Well, it's pretty simple. Like I said, it's a PS3 and an Xbox 360 game at the end of the day, so there's really only so much you can do with it, but I feel like people are going to be very interested to see this game in terms of performance and in terms of quality. So that's 1 game that we have on the 2nd of December, but like I said, there's 2 more. The next game on the list is Sonic Racing Crossworlds, which is finally gracing the Nintendo Switch 2 system after a, well, very questionable Switch 1 version of the game. I actually purchased the Switch 1 version of the game against my better judgment because I thought, well, I can make a video on this and maybe it's not that bad, and you know, graphically speaking was the main problem. The gameplay wasn't bad. The low frame rate didn't help things, but the graphics of the game, this looked very muddy and very convoluted. But I did like the core gameplay mechanics of the game, and it seems like the Switch 2 version is going to be a much better experience than the Switch 1 version. According to Sega themselves, the game will be running at 1440p, 60 frames per second in docked mode, which should make for a very interesting and pleasing visual experience on the Switch 2. Now, one of the questions I have about this, though, kind of once again comparing it to other platforms, is, you know, is there going to be less stuff going on in the backgrounds? Are some of the effects going to be toned down in order to get that higher frame rate and that higher resolution? I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see to kind of figure that out once the game comes out. But this, I think, is an important game because it was a larger third-party release that was a multi-platform game that looked and played really well on all the other platforms, except for one, with the Switch 2. Now, or the Switch 1, I should say. Now, when it comes to the Switch 2, it does seem like there is an upgrade path because thank the Lord, if you bought the Switch 1 version of the game, I do believe there is an upgrade path with this game so that you could get it at a discounted price. Which, I mean, you should really just refund everyone who bought the Switch 1 version of the game because it's ass. But I think this will be an important game, and this is a game I'm looking forward to playing because Knights is in the game, and Knights is god tier when it comes to characters. The final game is, of course, a game that I don't necessarily think is all that great, but from a technological perspective, I think this will be potentially the most important game on this list of 3 third-party titles. Also comes out on December 2nd, and that is Assassin's Creed Shadows. A very controversial game, a game that, you know, it seems like Ubisoft may have inflated those numbers a little bit. I did play quite a bit of this game, and I didn't think it was horrible or anything like that. There were elements of the game that I genuinely enjoyed, but I also didn't think it was this revolutionary Assassin's Creed game that was going to redefine and rewrite history when it comes to how Ubisoft is viewed, and I mean, it seems like I was right about it. But the technical perspective of this game on the Switch 2 is going to be very interesting because much like another game that I really didn't like, Star Wars Outlaws, Ubisoft did a really damn good job of bringing that game over to the Nintendo Switch 2. Like, that's still one of the better ports from a technological perspective, not necessarily from a game perspective, because I don't know, it seems like people can't differentiate that. People try to attack me for saying that Star Wars Outlaws was an impressive port on the Switch 2 because I made a Star Wars Outlaws video for the game on the Xbox Series X. And they're like, oh, look, he likes it because it's Nintendo. And it's like, I never said I liked the game. I said the port, the technological port, the graphics of the game are impressive. The way that the frame pacing is done in the game is impressive. It's not a good game. And I think Assassin's Creed Shadows is going to be like that as well. But evidently there's VRR support. It's a locked 30 frames per second. And from a technological perspective, this game is probably the most important out of the 3 because of the simple fact that this kind of gives you a baseline going forward when it comes to third-party games. A lot of the third-party games that have come out on the Switch 2 thus far have been, I mean, really all over the place. Some of them have been really high-quality versions, such as WWE 2K25, running at 60 frames per second and having game share on it. I will always talk about that game because I'm disappointed that nobody bought it because it's one of the better ports on the system and none of you bought it. But then you also have crappy ports on the system as well, like, well, pretty much every Bandai Namco game. So I think this is going to be important from a third-party perspective to kind of gauge how the Nintendo Switch 2 will handle larger games from third-party companies going forward. But it does seem like Ubisoft is up to the task. You could sit there and say that Assassin's Creed Shadows is great. You could say it's crap. I fall somewhere in the middle. But the technological perspective of this is going to be very, very important. And then, of course, finally, the creme de la creme, the exclusive game on the list. Drum roll, please. Metroid Prime 4. My God, have I been waiting for a long time for this game. I have been waiting since the Wii. Literally since the Wii. Since I finished Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, I have been waiting for this game. I am a Metroid Prime fan. And this, I think, is going to be a very, very important game because, honestly speaking, this should be the best-selling Metroid game by far. And why is that? Not because it's a first-person perspective, but because of the fact that this is launching on 2 different systems, 2 different platforms, the Switch 1 and the Switch 2. Switch 2 fans are looking for a new game. They might have picked up Kirby Star, whatever, the Kirby Air Riders. I want to say Star Allies. Air Riders, but they shouldn't have. They should have saved their money for Metroid Prime 4. And then the Switch 1 user base is still pretty large, and this is a big title releasing for the Switch 1. So this should set sales records for Metroid Prime games. And I think this game is going to be a very high-quality game, but I am a little bit worried about it. And let me tell you why. You know, from everything that we've seen with this game, all the trailers and stuff like that, like the weird Scott the Woz looking dude, the assistant guy who's kind of annoying, like, you know, it's annoying because it kind of diminishes the isolation feeling of the game, but in the same breath, it's like, you know, whatever. I don't think it's that detrimental to the game. But I am a little bit worried that they played it kind of too safe with this, and that at the end of the day, the Metacritic score might actually be the lowest Metroid Prime Metacritic score that we have seen. And that's simply because of the fact that this is a Switch 1 game at its core. Yes, the Switch 2 version has mouse controls, 120 hertz, you know, 120 frames per second, and various graphical modes, and looks better than the Switch 1 version of the game, but it's still a Switch 1 game. And when you kind of look at the Metroid Prime franchise, you know, when Metroid Prime 1 came out, that was the best looking first-person adventure game, first-person shooter game on a console on the GameCube. And that's across GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. Same thing could be said about Metroid Prime 2. And of course, Metroid Prime 3 had the mouse controls, and it was kind of a different experience on the Wii. So all of those games were ranked very, very highly. But since then, we've had lots of Metroid-style first-person adventure games come and go. So has the sizzle kind of worn off a little bit on the steak? It seems like it's a very safe Metroid Prime game, which for me is fine because I like the Metroid Prime universe, but I do feel like they could have gone a little bit bigger, a little bit better, had some additional things such as multiplayer and stuff like that for having to wait so long for this game. And I do feel like there's going to be a little bit of a disappointment from some people with this game. Now, that's not to say this game's going to suck, because I think this is going to be one of the better Switch 2 games of the year so far, and I think I'll have it right up there with games like Donkey Kong Bonanza. But I do feel like there might be, you know, some interesting reviews that come out for it. But I think this is an important game because it finally comes out. Like, that's the most important thing here. How long has this game been in development hell? Like, we could finally celebrate Metroid Prime 4. But those 4 games definitely line up for a very important week for Nintendo. Arguably the most important week since the launch of the Switch 2. So what games are you picking up? Which games do you have on your hierarchy of games? What games do you want me to see? You want to see me cover first? And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Hit the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. I don't know why I'm using my left hand so much today. My right hand's fine. Later.